Hello, JB. Our topic for this week is about critical race theory
Hmm.
uh, for critical perspectives of curriculum class at UTSA.
Hmm.
So I wanted to get your, if you have any stories about discrimination in education or anything about the discrimination you experienced.
Okay, sure. It was. I'm thinking of the question, and there's two instances. I think one, I was actually going on a trip to see my mother. It was the time when I lived in Virginia. I rented a car like I normally do. I already know that, hey, I can't rent cars that's from New York or DC or certain states because, that tends to bring more attention. I just get a little normal everyday car. But I got a car and I'm on my way and I'm driving maybe early morning, maybe like 10 o'clock. And then I find myself being basically followed by the local cops. And so eventually he turns on his lights and I pull over. He comes over and just kind of checks over the car and, gives the whole spiel, license, registration. I tell him, hey, it's a rental car. Can I, reach down and get the rental agreement and things of that nature handed to him? Said, sure. And so he got that. And so looked over the tags, looked over the car again, went back, do whatever they do in the car. And then they come back and he's like, hey, okay, everything seems to check out, Mr. Brown. And I was like, hey, can I ask you, why was I pulled over? He said, well, I noticed that you were coming close to the lane line, basically the white line that divides the lanes, because I'm riding down the interstate. And I said, oh, okay, was I swerving or anything? He said, no, you just were driving close to it. And I'm like, okay, that I didn't realize that was a crime. He's like, well, I just wanted to check to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, okay, well, you never asked me how I was doing or how I was feeling. You just asked for my license and registration and you looked over the car. But anyway, I said, okay, that's fine. And, I drive on. I don't even get out of the state and I'm coming real close to the border. And I look in my rear view and I'm talking to my wife and there's another cop that is following me and he's not put on his lights. He's staying maybe like a car length behind. But this one got a little scary because what ended up happening was the car in front of me saw the cops, so they immediately start to slow down, and they slow down extremely, a lot. And so the speed limit I think was 65, and I don't know, they were going like 50, and I'm like, hey, you're slowing down a little too much. And I look in my rear view again, and there's an 18-wheeler in right behind me, and I mean he is going full bore. And so I'm getting nervous because I'm like, okay, either he's not seeing the cop, this guy is, I'm seeing the cop, he's not slowing down, but we have to slow down. The cop's not moving. And so it ended up being the truck switch lanes, goes zooms around the cop and myself. And then I finally said, hey, you know what? I'm tired of following this car. I said, I don't know what he's going to do. Let me get from around him because he's steadily slowing down. He's decreasing his speed. And so I speed up and I said, I know when I speed up, they're probably going to go ahead and pull me over. And sure enough, I speed up, never break the speed limit, and I go around the car. And then the cop just pulled me over. Now, this one got a little scary because he was with a partner. And typically, most of the time in Virginia, they come on your driver's side, however, they want you to pull over to the right side. So your door is always facing the street, basically, or the road. And so they come up to me and he's license registration. And I'm like, now I'm frustrated because I'm like, well, officer, what's the problem? And he immediately told me to shut up. And you were telling that guy way too much. And I'm like, sir, you're making him slow down. And that 18-wheeler, you're about to cause a major accident because that 18-wheeler was going at least about 70 or 80. And they were just like disregarding that. So then when he came back and brought me the stuff, his partner got out the car and he went to my passenger side front and he kept his hand on his gun. And then they came to the passenger side and he brought me my stuff on the passenger side. And I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? Why is this turning different? And he made me roll down the window on the passenger side. And he was like, well, I said, what's the problem? I said, because this is actually the second time I've been stopped today. Do I need to call my rental place and tell them to immediately bring me another car? because I said, I'm not going to continue to drive this and keep getting stopped. And
So sorry
so,
to interrupt. And you have your wife with you, right? You
no,
have
I
your
was talking to her on the phone. And so now she's really nervous and she wants to keep the phone on. So I was like, okay, I'll keep the phone on. And so she could just listen and hear, because it's just real frightening. You just don't know. And so, my thing of it is, like I've always told my kids, I said, you don't have to be afraid, because when you're afraid, you tend to rush things and you tend to act different. So I said, you just be calm, continue to talk in a calm voice, no matter how they're speaking to you, and you just answer the questions that they tell you to answer. And so I basically asked him that, and he was just like, well, these cars are typically, this is a big, heavy drug route, and it's the main intersection. It's the main interstate on the East Coast, I-95. And he basically stated that, sometimes a lot of people use these type of rental cars to go, move dope. And I was like, okay, well, as you can see, I'm not pushing trafficking dope or anything like that. My license is fine. And he's just like, yeah, well, we got off on the wrong foot. And he offered his hand, to shake my hand. But his partner never moved from my side. He never moved off that front fender, and he never took his hand off his gun. And so, and I'm just thinking, I understand what you're saying, but you look at your partner, and I said, you look at what he's doing. And I said, and I've seen that before. And it's just, like I said, it's the day and time for, being an African American man in the US. It's things that you have to understand. And that was probably my most, intimidating moment, because I mean, I really feel like they were anticipating things to go wrong.
It is sad.
And
It is sad.
yeah, and it's unfortunate. And all I was doing was going to go home to see my mom.
Yeah.
And I guess if I needed to wear a shirt and tie and look a certain way, so I'm not the typical black man that's driving on a work day that should be at work or something like that. It's just hard to kind of put into words or put into a framework that people can truly understand and really take the gravity of the whole situation.
And you
Um,
told me you had a story about the college too, with the
Yeah,
discrimination.
I went to school. I'll leave the school name out. But while I was at school, I was like the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and so there was an issue that came up where this particular professor, which happens to be the dean of the school at the time, they had this class where they taught freshmen how to interview and things of that nature, just introducing them into civil engineering or the engineering world. So they basically had to do an interview. And this is this one gentleman who was probably a few shades darker than I am. And he wore his business attire, dressed very professional and things of that nature. He went through the mock interview, and it went fine. But this professor, who happened to be white, stated to him, he said, from now on, when you go to an interview, because you're so black, I would suggest you not wear a dark suit. And anyway, that information got to me because I guess they felt like I was the only advocate that they had. And there have been other instances where this particular professor said some pretty harsh things, whether it was, chauvinistic or just anti-gay and just real kind of microaggressive type things, not real overt, but just subtle things. Like I think one instance he stated that a woman can never be a civil engineer, can never succeed as a civil engineer. Things, and they don't look at you the way that they wouldn't appreciate you, or so to speak. And I think the worst thing that a lot of people do is wrap a lie in a little bit of truth. It really puts a hard spin on it to make it difficult to really to fight back against. Because what he said, okay, yeah, there's plenty of jobs where women are probably mistreated or persecuted against, but I don't think that's in your privy to go ahead and try to shut somebody down or to deter them from going into a field that they probably love, and never know, they might can change that whole perspective on that field. And so, and you don't know how you tear down people that way. And so I engaged him, you know, and again, I'm just a student. You know, this is a 10-year professor, and he is the dean of our school. And I told him about the situation. Now, needless to say, he kind of dismissed it, and he was like, well, you know, I didn't mean it like that, blah, blah, blah. Well, and I told him, I said, listen, you can't keep deterring or hurting students like that, because I feel like it's my duty to come to you and tell you, hey, this is what's going on. The next time it happens, I mean, I'm going to have to do other things, and
Well,
we'll have to raise it to another level, because I said you can't do that in this day and time. And again, that was in the 90s,
yeah.
you know,
Well,
early
thank you.
90s.
Thank you
And
for the stories, and then thank you for joining this video with us.
okay, thanks.